Good morning to all. My name is Manoj, and thank you for joining in on a Sunday morning. Uh, Me, Sandhya, and Shweta, we represent Bangalore schools in the community. We also run this company called the Bangalore Schools Education Initiatives, and BSEI, along with Teachers Collective, bring you this amazing seminar on the Parents Guide to School Online. BSEI is a group that was formed as an offshoot of Bangalore Schools Group, which is a 48,000 member group in Facebook, one of the largest group focused on parenting and education. Shweta founded this group in 2012, and me and Sandhya help her run the group together now. The focus is on being a platform, a single platform, wherein we bring in parents, schools, educators, students, and service providers, where we can all help to get each other for the betterment of education and parenting. So that's a quick introduction of BSEI. Let me invite Shweta Sharan to take it from here, the founder of Bangalore Schools Group and BSEI. Shweta, kindly take it over from here.
Thank you, Manoj. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. Welcome to the Parents Guide to School Online, a webinar by the Teachers Collective in association with BSEI. As parents, all of us are finding it very different to navigate the online learning challenges that we see with our children. So how do we apply all that we know into practice every day to both help our children navigate the scenario and set them up for success long term? So today we will listen to the Teachers Collective, to Parul Mathur and Sangeeta Krishnamurthy, who will guide us and give us tools and strategies as to how to help our children with the online learning mode. So I'll introduce both our facilitators for today's webinar. A little bit more about the Teachers Collective. The Teachers Collective Bangalore is a group of teachers who want to reach beyond the classrooms, work with children, and make learning the fun experience it can be. Their skills are varied, but their wavelengths are similar. The common question they ask is, how do we make children passionate and motivated about what they learn? So I will give a quick introduction to Parul and to Sangeeta. Parul is an RCI certified special educator with 2 postgraduate degrees in the field of psychology and child development. She has over 12 years of experience in the field, and she has a strong passion for teaching and working with all children, those with different learning and life needs included. So she has headed a SEN department and taught life skills and psychology to middle and high school students. Sangeeta Krishnamurthy has 2 master's degrees in business law and accountancy. She's a certified public accounting professional and has a certificate in special education with a focus on autism. She has worked flexi and full-time at the Samhita Academy for 6 years. She has trained teachers in inclusion, has set up trauma-sensitive classrooms, and she also teaches special educators courses on using technology for learning and ADHD at KPAMRC and IRC in Bangalore. So in addition to her home therapy center, she teaches structured social skill classes at Brindavan. So Sangeeta and Parul, it's really exciting to have both of you here. We are really looking forward to the session. I know that I am really interested in hearing what you have to say so that I can help my daughter, because like many parents here, I too am going through the uncertain and the yet interesting experience of accessing online learning. So I'll hand over the discussion to Sangeeta and Parul. Thanks.
Hi. Thanks, Shweta.
All right, so welcome everyone. We are very excited to bring things that we know works, that have been proven. We'll just directly get into it. Thank you, BSEI, for giving us this platform. And we'll jump straight in. So we want to talk here about why we are here. We will be giving you strategies. We will be talking about academics. But for us, the ultimate goal, the big picture is always learning skills, being able to negotiate in a world and be lifelong learners. So at no point do we want to lose track of that in this, can I do an exam better? We will be talking about all of that. And those things are important too. But the point we're trying to say here is that there is more to it than just that, right? So our big picture is learning and education in the longer term. A little about us. Right now, we're 3 teachers. We're about 4 years old in terms of formally working together as the Teachers Collective. We believe in inclusive, safe learning environments. We believe in fun, method-based activities. So our children will come and do things along with us. And once they're our kids, they're always our kids. That means they have us, they come to even one session, one workshop. That means they have us like forever. They can reach out to us. We are there to give them information. We're there for their parents. We encourage parents to participate in our sessions as well. Right? So that's who we are.
And I think Shweta did a fantastic job in introducing us. So yes, so what we realized was what works in the mainstream schools and what works with our set of kids that we were working with. It works for all the kids, irrespective of their learning needs, their backgrounds. So we thought, why not, make it more accessible and make it more, take it further just than schools. So we decided to, come together and work in such spaces.
Yeah, and like Shweta said, I'm an accountant from a previous janmam. I went to the US, studied there. I had experience in how learning could be. Even as a master's student, the kind of flexibility and the fun learning became in several ways was something I enjoyed. And when I came back, I found my passion at 40. So I've had this experience, but right now is when I feel all alive and excited to work with kids. So that's where we come from. So we're going to start with a few concepts, right? We want to make a few things clear because there is so much working around in terms of the semantics of it, the terminology. What we're doing now is school online. Yeah, is it a big difference? It seems like a very small difference, but it's actually quite a big difference. Because taking a school online is very, very different from online school, where you sign up into a school and that school is actually meant for online. So that means that school is set up in such a way, an online school is set up in such a way that it's never going to have anything more than 1 or 2 face-to-face classes, right? So what we are doing now is school online. And let's get a little into this. Now, we don't want to get too much into the theory. This whole thing is about giving strategies and practical tips. But there are a few things that work. Now, we are not going into should we not. That is not the scope of this. We are talking about all of us in a situation that very few of us control. And what can we do to make the best of this situation? So there are a few things that have happened that are actually also good for education overall. One is increased student autonomy. The child can switch off and go. Right? That's something that they couldn't go when you physically had them in a classroom. So this means then they have resources at their fingertips. The teacher has to be a little more of everything because they can go and tell you, link it up and every mistake is out there. This also means there's this increased accountability. If I've come to class and I'm sitting there, that means there is something I have to do. So there is something good that has happened for the student. This also means then that teachers have to get more innovative, right? It's not something that we can just sit on lecture mode alone. So we have to get a lot more innovative for best practices. More time. Now we'll talk to you a little about, all of us feel like there's never enough time, but you think about it, most of us have gained the commute time. Now how we use it, we're going to get into a little more detail. So I won't go into that here. Many children struggle to sit and listen in school. And we are not talking about special kids at all. We're talking about all of us. You will find it during this seminar, all of us will be moving around. I actually have a chair that goes around like this, right? That will help me move around. So flexible workstations, including sitting. If you have a kinesthetic learner, they can stand and listen. We've actually eliminated some of the problems that teachers had issues with in classrooms. And the best thing, for example, personally, we've taught children in New Zealand. We taught children in Dubai. We have taught children bilingually from an army battalion, right? So this has actually given us an option to go beyond our own geography. And just like that, now we have access to the best that the world can give, whether it is your extracurriculars, whether it is any kind of co-curricular learning. We actually have now access beyond of our geography. And that honestly is a huge advantage that we can make a lot of if we want to. What doesn't work or what needs work? Now, increased screen time, something that is on every parent's radar. Is this something that we can avoid right now? Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, outside of our control. But what can we do with these constraints to do a little more about increased screen time? It is definitely a concern. There are also these physical and digital issues that we have. Do we have enough gadgets to go around? If we have 3 people, 4 people in the house with working parents, that's something of concern. Concurrent meetings, actual places to be, bandwidth, these are all concerns, and we're very cognizant of the fact that only 8% of Indian children are connected. So these are our constraints that are known constraints. So now we have to figure out with all of this and how do we go beyond to extend it. Long class hours, what we know does not work is if you're going to take something that worked offline and convert it into an online curriculum exactly the same way, it does not work. So that is definitely something that schools are coming up with. We know schools that are just doing 3 periods with a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. There are options. But if people are going to think that we just take that long class hour and convert it, that absolutely does not work. And there's also the age, which age is what works for. So these are all, I would say, challenges that we as parents, if we find these happening, will be going and lobbying with schools. Because let's remember now that parents are equally a good stakeholder here. So we do have a voice, and you can go as a teacher or as a parent, go and challenge and say, listen, this works, this doesn't work. Can we consider this? And schools, many of them are willing to listen, because everyone, let's remember, is trying to make the best of the situation. Parental involvement and supervision. When we have working parents, younger kids, this is a concern. This is a concern. So what we want to do, we want for children to become independent learners to the level possible. And that we have worked with kids from 6 years of age all the way to college level. And it works, right? Cyber security, now we are not experts, so we are going to bring up some pointers on what needs to be thought about, but this is definitely something that all of us have to think about. So these are the areas that we're going to provide some solutions. Obviously, we don't have all the answers, but we're going to try our best. The other terminology thing, everyone's now saying we are homeschooling. Now, let me give you personally, I homeschool one child as well as I have a child in school. I am of the point that there is no binary. There is not one versus the other. Certain things work for certain things don't work for certain kids, and that's how it is. Homeschooling is when you take up all the accountability for a child's learning. That means you're looking beyond just a curriculum or just an exam. You're looking at internships. You're looking at making sure that child has other adults. Now, homeschooling is not this, isolated learning only at home. It is learning outside of a school, right? What we are all doing now when our schools are giving us programs at home is schooling at home. That means the primary responsibility for that curriculum is still with the school. And we are now becoming partners with them. And again, like we said, these things may seem like small changes, but it actually isn't. If you're going to become a homeschooling parent, you're taking a lot more responsibility. And then it becomes there are so many avenues then we look at that we will not be looking when we're schooling at home. So this we are talking about right now is only the schooling at home part in this seminar. Again, like we said, there is no one versus the other. Synchronous is when there is a teacher or a facilitator at the other end and there is interaction. Asynchronous is when we are all learning based on this and doing our projects as well, right? And we want some combination of the two. Both have their advantages. With synchronous learning, there's personal participation, there is more motivation, there is social skill, there is negotiation with your team. We want that. Asynchronous is when we are sitting and doing it. And let's remember, all this has happened in schools all the time. We are now learning of these terms, but you would go to school and you would, do your classes, do some worksheets with your teacher, and then a lot of the learning happened with good homework and study at home. So this is not new to us at all, right? And this now is also what we need, some combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. End of the day, it all works when we connect. Now, the reason we're putting this out here is we will get into solutions and strategies, and it might get into the micro level. But let's not at any point forget, we want children to connect with children. We want parents to connect with their children and other parents in their community, and the same for teachers in schools. And what we want to emphasize here is that this is not a physical construct. If I'm really, really upset, a stranger on the street cannot come and hug me and comfort me just because they're physically there. We need trust, we need safety, to feel safe. And those are the people who can connect with us. Many of you probably have friends who you've never met, but on social media who you connect with because of thoughts, right? So we want to put this thing of connect and separate out that it's not only physical, it's also, it can be more than physical. So the connect that happens with the teacher, it's not like the teacher is going around and hugging everyone. That will actually be very creepy if we have a teacher hugging all the kids, right? So what is happening in the school is also this. It's just happening face to face, but there is trust and a safe space, and those are the teachers you connect with. So we want to put that out here, that connect is not just a physical construct. Okay, now into the solutions. Parul, you want to go?
Yes. So we've been talking about the various terminologies that is floating around, but now everybody is looking for solutions. And so what we've been talking about, where we come from, there are some suggested practices that we have categorized for you for better clarity. That if we look at into these spaces, we can bring in some change, make it more interesting, make it more engaging, make it more active. Because when we say school online, and when you are only listening to the teachers giving you lectures and prescriptive all the time, then how do we make it work for them? How do we make it more enjoyable for them? So I'm sure most of us are looking for those solutions. So these are the few broad areas that we've been, we'll be talking about today. So that includes your workstations, that includes your organization, that includes what are the different tools that if we can provide our children with, that they can, make learning more fun and interesting. So the whole idea behind using smart tools and smart learning and visual notes is that you want your children to learn in the smart way, and you don't want them to work hard, because this has come very naturally to us, hey, you need to work hard, your exams are coming, you need to do this because of so and so. So we want children to work smart. So if we start off with setting up spaces, now as adults, if we are into a workspace which is inviting, which has appropriate lighting and cool environment, everybody is motivated to work, right? Is if we have a, and that too if we have a designated workspaces. So the idea behind providing with a workspace which is more or less little bit personal to the child brings in more what do you say, engaging element into the child's learning process. So this is something which we suggest, and we have seen works with a lot of kids that we work with, that if we have a a poster where you can, the child, his or her name can be put up, or something that the child can relate to, maybe a picture of a sibling, a family picture, a picture of friends, something which is very personal. And if we categorize that workstation into these 6 elements, into like little bit of organization, it works out wonders with the child. So the first thing we talk about is designated place. Now we can understand that there might be parents who are working at home, there may be older sibling who will be working at home. So having a designated workstation might not be a idea that most of the parents can float around. But if you have something which is like consistent, it brings in more the child feels this is my personal space, this is where I need to sit. The child, like how you have a desk at school and which you can relate to, you have a personal locker in the classroom which you relate to. Similarly, we want a workstation that the child is able to relate to. Then we say stationery pouch. Now any portable stationery pouch which has the basic requirements, so that every day you don't have to hunt for an eraser or pencil. And then if you look at the stack of books, there is a vertical stack and there is a horizontal stack. So if there are 4 classes in a day, so most of the schools are going with 3 hour or 4 hour, time slots that they have given students or the classes. So if they can have like for 2 classes standing and 2 classes vertical, it's a straight away visual clue for the child to relate to, okay, this is what I need for the first half and this is what I need for the second half. And then if you look at the fourth picture, it has a background at the back, a board. Now many of us might not have a board. Then how do we create that kind of a visual space for child, where child can put up what is upcoming and what I need to remember for the next day, or something which is very critical and you want it to have that as a visual reminder. So maybe you can just have a string with a lot of pegs and you can just stack it there, a simple solution which doesn't need much of resources. And then yes, it's a thing versus a natural daylight versus a artificial light. So obviously if we cannot have space which is closer to, so now the another question or topic of debate was whether the lighting should be in the front or at the back. So a front is always preferable as compared to the back because of the view. We don't want something which is glaring at screens and children are finding it difficult and, trying to make all those funny faces to read what the teacher is putting up on the screens. So that was another thing. So any kind of warm light which is soft and soothing is advisable. And then the music. Now over the years we've been researching too. Me and Sangeeta have been looking for a lot of these researches where which have shown that music in the background has an impact on children's mind. Now if the music is soothing and if the child is able to relate to and responds to is good, but any music which is loud and the child himself or herself feels like singing together and jam is something we won't recommend. But yes, any form of music in the background after the school is over and the child is still engaging with the screen to complete assignments or projects is suggestive, because that brings or breaks some monotony of what the child has been, because when you are listening to a teacher or when you are looking at the screen and when the teacher is sharing the material, it's still a passive learning that the child is occupied with. So we want that passive to move to more active learning where the child is using all the senses and is using the time effectively. So this was all about workstations. Now we have few workstations that we would like to share with you, and these are our kids we have worked with over 4 years who have sent us the pictures. So it ranges from something which is like to very basic.
So again, the point here is not that you have to go and do something tremendous and go and buy bunches of stuff. If you notice, you can do a lot with exactly what you have, right? But it does definitely give children some kind of structure and comfort to have their own space that is just theirs.
Yeah, so now these are certain situations which over the years when we've been talking to a lot of parents and children, they face in their everyday transaction either at school or at home. So we want you to give that 30 seconds and see if these are the situations where you as a child were able to relate to or you as a parent are able to relate to. So I'm sure each one of us can relate to at least couple of these situations which we face in our day-to-day life when the child comes and share it with us at home or when we were growing up and we went through exactly the same scenario. So now just take a mental note of those situations and see if my child comes with that situation, how do I deal with it? What do I tell my child that, okay, if you are not able to remember, what can I help you with? If you know this, but you are not able to reproduce for your test, what do I do? How can I help you with? So these are few programs which are our flagship programs that we teach and we work with children on these. These are standard like study skills. Now, what do you mean by study skills? So remember when I said we want our children to work smart and learn smart rather than work hard. So these are certain tools which gives your child that engagement, that when, okay, if I have a graphic organizer, or if I have a method where I can break the big task into smaller chunks, will it help me? Or is there something, if there is a long text, especially history, social sciences are the subjects where children find it very difficult, because there's not much which children can apply or logically think about, but there is something that they have to mug up and remember and reproduce for examinations. Now, how do we make it, that process, seamless for them? How do we make it easier for them? So these are few methods that we work with. So first is the SQ3R, which is your survey, question, read, recite, and review. Then there is something called SOAR, which is your organization and your goal setting. How do you set goals? How do you set your long-term goals, short-term goals? And based on those specifics, you decide whether I need to put in. So sometimes one of the challenges that a lot of kids come to us with is, I want to do everything, but I don't have time, because they would be going for extracurricular classes, or they have something bogged down with their work at school. So if we can break down those big tasks for them into smaller achievable tasks, it helps them. So another one of the programs is the PQRC, which is your preview question. And so these are the proven study skill methods which we have used over the 4 years, and we have worked with thousands of students, and it has shown results.
Let me give you my personal anecdote here. So when I at 40 became a teacher, and actually Parul taught me study skills as well when I got into school. One second, Malaika, can you tell them to? So when she taught me, I came home and I taught my kid who was then in grade 4. Now this is a child who was not very interested or would resist learning quite a bit. So we went at it. And what would happen before would be that they would walk up and study something. And in 1 hour, when he came back, I would ask him 2 questions. And by the third question, there is no information. So what happens then? I would get into saying, oh, but you said you were studying and now 1 hour is gone. And that child would be like, no, you're trying to. And it got into this kind of a conflict situation. What happened then was, so I kept at it and he learned study skills. He went up and he tried to study it. 45 minutes, he comes down and says, I got this. I was like, all right. So that means, at least instead of wasting 1 hour, we've only wasted 45 minutes today. And then I asked a question, he answered it. I asked another question, he answered it. As the situation went, I was getting more and more frustrated because I was sure that he hadn't got it and I was trying to trick him. And he was very, very excited because he had got all of it. So in 20 minutes, we had finished. So 45 minutes to study the lesson. We're talking about grade 4. 45 minutes is actually quite a lot to study a lesson. But in that 20 minutes of assessing and figuring out, we were both comfortable and he went off to play. The whole focus for us is get this done so that kids can do what they also enjoy. So why use study skills, right? Parents keep asking us this. Parul, you want to get into it a little more?
Yeah, so why use study skills? So parents keep asking us, when the school is doing so much, when the teacher is using graphic organizers at school, they are doing all kind of revision. Why do we need additional, a subject? Or sometimes they say, why do we need this add-on to whatever is going on, and it's going on very smooth? But what we think is going on smooth might not be the scenario, because when we interact with kids, we see where they are coming from, where their frustrations are coming on. There are a lot of schools which are highly academic oriented, and we have schools which are balanced, and we have schools which are also alternate setup. So as parents, we also make choices. But when we make choices, we actually, I don't know how many of us do involve kids when we are making choice of schools for them. So a lot of kids come with that frustration. I want to play soccer, I want to do this on weekend, but I have to sit and finish my assignments and projects. So this is where we are coming from, that our children need these basic skills as life skills. Like, how do you teach your child to brush and all? And over the years, it's very independent skill. You don't have to monitor and say, oh, this is how it needs to be done. So similarly, these are the skills which we want to teach and child becomes lifelong independent to use them, irrespective whether they are in school setup, they are in workspaces. These are the skills which help them across. Now we have seen that these skills increase learning and learning outcomes. So when you are doing your projects, if you do your SQ3R where you are doing an intensive survey, you are doing your research, your outcome is definitely much more informed as compared to whatever you have heard your teacher talking about, or you are reading it from your own textbooks. It makes it more active. As I said, when we are listening to lectures at school, or when we are doing a notebook work at home, or when we are doing an assignment, a simple worksheet that the teacher has given as a follow-up activity is very, very passive, because everything is directed, everything is told how it needs to be done. So how do we make it active is these tools. You make the child independent in deciding what I need to, which skill, which tool I need to, do I need to use colors, do I need to not use colors. So this whole process makes the child independent and make learning more enjoyable. So it's exactly like you give curd rice or dal chawal every day, no harm, they are very good for your health. But kids need a lot of junk also, or a variety in food, or it's like different shoes. You can't put one shoe for every activity and say this is what we have, this is what we are providing, go ahead and do it. So it's just these different skills that we enable these children with, that they become lifelong learners and independent learners. We don't want to every time tell them this works and this doesn't work.
And we're just providing, we're telling you, like, giving an exposure here, because when we teach children, each of these is like a 2-3 hour session by itself with a lot of activities.
Yeah.
So whether you come to us or not, this is information that you can go look up. And if you want to teach your children yourself, then that's also an option. We do have our programs, but you don't necessarily only need to come to us. All right, attention span. There is a lot said about this, right? There was even one fake survey that came and said that people's attention span is less than that of a goldfish. And then it was found to be motivated research, right? It was someone trying to get their own agenda through. So what, again, there is ups and downs on this, but consensus seems to be that attention span moves anywhere from 2 minutes to about 15 minutes, even for the most motivated human.
We're and talking about adults. So imagine where the kids are coming from.
Yeah. And there are parents who come to us and say, but when he has to sit and watch TV, there's no problem. I think that's true of us too. But let's understand that when someone is studying, it's a lot more active. It's a lot more of a challenging process. So if it is something I like to do, I will be able to put in my 15 minutes, take a break and put in more 15 minutes and keep going like that. But when it's something I don't like, or I think I don't like it because I haven't done my practice and I'm not good at it. Let's remember, when children don't like something, it's usually because there is a deficit of a skill. And if we help them get there, then they're going to start liking that as well. So for whatever attention span, it varies for everyone, and especially if you're not passionate about it. So one of the things we suggest, and we're going to do this in honor of International Yoga Day. So please go ahead and do this. Pick up your chair if you're sitting on it. Do any one of these things. Come on, all of you stand up and let's go. So I have my chair here and I'm going to be a manta ray. Just take this and hold it for 30 seconds or 20 seconds. If you are injured or something, please don't hurt yourself more. If it's uncomfortable, don't do it.
Yeah.
One leg and then the other.
I'm trying to be urchin but struggling.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, simple. It took 30 seconds. Guess what? Now I have your attention for 20 more seconds or 15 more seconds. And as long as I can keep you involved, that means my next 15 minutes is going to go really well. Think about how you feel right now. All of us need a break. So can we teach our children this? When you're feeling uncomfortable, you don't have to stand up, because most classes are 40 minutes, right? And I think at this point, teachers probably don't have too much of an issue if children stand up, but there is so much that you can do with the chair itself. There's also this thing where you take your hands and you put it underneath your legs and you try to lift yourself off. For children who basically you're pulling yourself off like that, it's not easy. I can't do it very well. But these are all simple things that children can do that will help them get their attention up over a period of time.
Yeah. So
They-
these are also called as energizers if you want to Google and read more about them. So see if you can use couple of these energizers when you are working with the child.
And simple, huh? You don't need major stuff.
Yeah.
So now again, case study. There was a child who came to us for study skills at the end of grade 7. And we taught her, and she tried a little here and there, was not consistent. Didn't work very well. The parent brought her back to us end of the year saying, now, you know what, she's getting into 8th standard. This is getting really critical. All right, she came to us, we worked with her, she understood all the concepts, but she didn't really use it. Then they came that one jhatka of that test, 1st July, that test that you see up there. And then she was like, oh my God, I have this, I'm going to try it. And guys, this is a true situation. This is actual marks that was sent to us. Notice 3rd July. It's not like suddenly this child became a genius that they were not. It was just the use of these techniques that helped. She used visual notes and she used study skills, and this is what it is, right? Now, again, like we said, our whole goal is marks is only a byproduct of learning. It's not the end goal. But I don't see why in a world like this, our children cannot also learn and get the marks.
So now this is another set of situations that we want you to pause for 30 seconds and read through and see if you can relate to, or have you ever experienced it when your child coming to you and shared something like this to you about, and what solutions were at that point you could think of. So can we, so this is where we come from, that if we can give you some solutions which are all suggestive and we have worked and we have seen that these works. So these all are about visual notes. So when we say visual notes, we talk about sketch noting as young as, when the child is 6 years old. Sketch noting is basically if you go for a trip, or if you're reading about as simple as plants or trees, how do you draw it? How do you visually present it? We'll be sharing some work of our children with you. So you'll have a better idea. And then from sketch noting, we move on to simple, a web concept web. For example, if we are doing about sun, so what are the 4 things that are critical to sun or trees or plants? And then it obviously gets more complex as the child goes into middle and high school. Now, why visual notes? Because a lot of us have different learning needs. Okay, but if you look at us, how do we learn the best? There is a questionnaire which is available if you Google it, there is something called VARK, and there is also one which is developed by us. So it stands for visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile learners. So if you know how my child learned the best, these are certain tools which you can give the child, and it will work out wonders. Now, why visual notes? Because they are very high on details. It is very interesting to look at. So it's exactly like how your black and white ad versus something which is very fancy. Even if the child doesn't know how to read McDonald's, but just looking at the logo and the color, the child says, I want to eat McDonald's. So it's exactly like what we want. We want the the learning to be very, very interactive. We want it to be very interesting. We want it to something which won't stick to the child's mind. So we don't want the children to just register and keep it, but we want something they can connect to every year and build on, like from as young as grade 5, 4, 3, and the concepts keep building on. And they are flexible because this is something which is created by you, created for you. You are not, nobody is giving you marks, nobody is passing judgments. So if you think this detail doesn't work for me here, I need to do it like this, you have the full flexibility to work with that. And so this is how visual note works. So we'll take you through few samples of visual notes that our children have done, so you'll have an idea of what we are where we are coming from.
And also we want to say one thing here. It's like if I saw a photograph and I drew it, right? I would know which parts I got and which parts I didn't. When I see my photograph, I'll know something is missing. This is exactly like that. So I have the lesson, there are all these details. I do my visual note and I say, oh, this is how I structure it. This is all the details I need. And on one page, I can get very complex concepts. So we'll show you how some of our kids have done this. Like we said, everything we're talking about has been proven in the Indian setting, mainstream, homeschooled, all of these kids, many of them are low economic backgrounds, not comfortable with English. We actually take language out as a little of an issue here. So as you can see, those visual notes went by subject. There was English all the way to whatever subject we want to call, including fun, right? We had all age groups from 6 all the way up to college. We had complexity in terms of concepts. For example, financial statement analysis on one page with everything you absolutely need to go ahead and do your exams. So this is absolutely possible and it works. Parul, you want to go on this?
Yeah, and also I want to bring in little technical aspect here. Like we talked about visual memory, right? When we say visual notes and
Parul, your volume needs to go up on your mic a bit.
yeah, so I said when we talked about visual notes, I also want to bring in something here about which is called as muscle memory. So the more we let children do and practice the text diagrams, it has a some relation where the child that's the information that the child remember for the longest. So when we say creating notes, making notes is not big deal because everything is online. You can just go and click on it and read about it and that's it. But when we say we want to make the learning more engaging, learning more active, we also want children to use a lot of these things, do it themselves and create that muscle memory. And when we talked about the graphic organizers, so you would have seen there were a lot of spider webs, there were a lot of these main idea and the details. So these graphic organizers, so the tool, so remember whatever suggestions we are giving or whatever recommendations we have been talking about the practices. So this is something that you can Google. It's available up there. You can download and give it to your child and see if it works. So we have seen that giving children these, handy, like for example, for the younger ones, a simple 5 W's and H. You read a story, answer the 5 W's and H, and you see, oh wow, fantastic, yeah, you got the story. To something which is more complex. So we not only have reluctant readers, but we also have reluctant writers. Now, if we can ask, one simple, if we can give a STEM sentence, and if we ask the child to just put in 1 or 2 sentences for each of the given this thing, you are already putting up the child for success by having a 1 paragraph already created for you. So these are simple tools that we have seen. You give children, you equip them, you make them practice, and then they know, okay, fine, next time I come across this thing, something like this in exams, Sometimes children freeze because they don't know, they are not creative enough, or they think we are not very imaginative. So imagination, it's not something you're born with, right? So we keep telling children, no, it's not about that, you, it's not about vocabulary, it's not about words, it's just the idea. So how do you bring that idea is through, visual notes. How do you bring it to the sentences and the paragraph level? So this is basically the transition that the child goes through. So drawing it to representing it into words to coming up with sentences and constructing paragraphs. So this is the whole path that the child goes through in these workshops.
And we also want to, what shall we say, differentiate between what is writing. Many people call handwriting, actually using your hand and writing, as writing. Writing is actually a lot more. It's about the idea and how you organize it. After I do that, whether I do it handwritten or typewritten is honestly just the fallout. Now, do we want children to write with their hands? Yes, but that is for developmental reasons. But when we're talking about writing by itself, to bring, if a child finds it hard to sit and write, it's okay for us to bring that pressure down, focus on the idea, get them to understand this, and then the writing will come on its own. Then if they're really engaged in their idea, then you will have to stop them, right? And that's what we're looking for here.
So now when we have talked about visual notes, we have talked about study skills. Now the big question that always parents ask us, and children think that they nag, my parents nag me with time. You don't have time, don't do this. Today you have to finish this because tomorrow we have to do this. You have to go for a weekend class, you need to finish it on Friday. So these are again certain situations. See if you can relate to, or if you have come across these situations. So
It
why we
might be yourself as a child as well. When you were a child, this is not only related to our kids. Let's remember that a lot of what we do to kids might
yeah.
actually be the problem, that if we do with kids might be a better way to do it.
So these all situations are for you to just keep a mental note of, that if my child comes to, or if any other child needs my help, you might be a teacher, educator yourself. And if you are in a space, if the child comes to me, are there any tips or suggestions that I can give the child, and the child can use it and start working on it? Yeah. So if you look at these jars, so this is by SOAR. It's also a nice study skill program, which is one of our also flagship programs. So we usually teach children how to prioritize their tasks and activities. Now it's very, very difficult as adults for us also to prioritize sometimes, because we want to do both, and very hard to make a choice. And here we are asking children to make a choice where they are like any day, they're given for these things. So if you look at the first jar, there are like these big rocks. Okay. So these are your day-to-day tasks that you get, which is like, given to you, which is not something that you have. So it's like maybe your teacher created assignment, or is it an online school choice, which the child doesn't have a choice with. This is what parents want children to do. Now, so if you put one or two, the jar is full. There is no room for anything else that needs to go in the jar. But this is how we want to work with? No. Because if we have these things, very, very little time to do something that the child wants to do, or as a parent, you want to facilitate. If you look at the second jar, it is still broken, but still the pieces are very big. That means somewhere you and your child connect and say, okay, fine, this is something we can do away with. Maybe this is something, so this is something which is non-negotiable, the first one, versus something which we come to a common sense is, okay, fine, we can, do this. So this is 50% of what I want you to do, and 50% as a, like, maybe I have an opinion of what I want to do. Then the third one is when you have small pebbles. Now, where we are coming from is, so from the first jar to the transition to the second to the third. So we want children to break up their day-to-day tasks into these smaller achievable tasks, so that they have multiple, they have time to do multiple things that they always want to do. Because like we've been working with like as young as 6 year old who also have a mind of their own. So by the way, we think, okay, 6 year old, we'll say do this, they do it, but they also are challenging and they push back saying, I don't want to do it. So if we can, as a family, do this, something like this with our children, and not do the first and the second blocks where we are just bombarding them, do this, do this, do this. If we can have something that we both want to achieve, and if we can break it into like something which is very critical, needs to be done in first 3 months, prioritize something that you want to do for the rest of the year, and prioritize over that. So this is how we want children to think.
And notice that the ideal jar, the third one, has a lot of free time.
Yeah.
Children's work is play. We want them to play. We want them to go and be bored, because that is when new ideas come and they come up with their own goals. A lot of good ideas come when children have the time to think. We can't structure that time. So what we can do is prioritize and structure the other stuff. One of the questions that I saw on chat is, have you looked at the child's perspective? And I want to bring this up here. This is how we look at the child's perspective. I'll give you an example, again, personal example. I train schools and people on mindfulness. That's something that we find really, really works. So the first time we did it, I did it to my kids. I'm talking about my personally parented ones. I did it to them. So I would be, and they had early school. So before I had 10 minutes scheduled, I would be doing the lunch in the kitchen, and my children had to do this. And it was 6 minutes or 5 minutes guided activity. I would put it on. And it didn't work because I was trying to do it to them. They had no idea why they wanted to do it. It was one more thing their mother was pushing them through. And I mean, to my discredit, I didn't take the clue. I tried for almost a month. Bad idea. So what did I do then? I sat and I started doing it myself. I didn't push them to do it. I did it myself. My daughter joined in to say, all right, let's see what this is about. And you notice when they are going to come in on their own, it's much more powerful, and you've reached them in a way that you can never reach if you're going to mandate something. So she joined in. And then my son had to join in because everyone's doing it. Why should I be the only one left out? And if they got just 2 minutes of it, they were way better than they were before. So the concept here is, do not do to children, please do with, and modeling. So this is something that will work for all of us. There is nothing specific here that is only for children, only for special children, though that's how it is. But this is where we learned all of this, and this works for everyone.
So these are the SMART goals that we come up now. This is an acronym which is very popular and all over the internet, having set up SMART goals, SMART goals. But what SMART goals to Teacher Collective means is that when we have something, so SMART stands for something which is specific, which is measurable, which is accurate, which is reliable, and something that you can, test and see if it works for you or not. And then when we say short term and long term, we say short term 1 month. Now in that 1 month, as a family, you can come and say, hey, so now you don't need to set goals only for academics, but please set goals for non-academics also, so that then children know where the most of the time is also going. So if you only do academics, then they think, oh, my entire time, or I'm only everything is used up only for academics. So have them set goals for both, so that they are able to manage their time more effectively. So when we say short term, we feel 1 month is way more than enough, because more beyond that, then the child loses interest and it's very difficult to track. So have it 1 month. 1 week, 2 weeks is very, very difficult even as parents to keep track of. And then the long term is like one academic term. So when we say my long term goal is that I want to work on my creative writing skills, then my short term goal would be either I take one topic every week and build on it, or maybe every month if I read a couple of books and generate my own ideas and work with my own ideas. So this is how the short term and the long term goal works. Now one of the templates of this is also available on our website. You can easily download it and start using it. This is something which is it's like very similar to the traffic light, something you want to immediately stop, something you are doing good and you want to continue with that, and something you want to start off with. So something which is very, very specific, something that you can measure. So don't have too many of it, maybe 1 or 2 is good.
And please keep your expectations related to the developmental age of the child.
Yeah.
You cannot have 4 things they have to stop without telling them, oh, stop, you're always late, stop being late. Yeah. That doesn't help. So even when we give them goals, or we have something that we want to talk about and bring up feedback, it has to be smart. So when online school starts at 8 o'clock, I find that 5 times out of 6, you are not there on time. That then makes it very specific and becomes very dealable for that child to do. Become more empathetic. These are motherhood statements. We want to break this down and tell them exactly where we see, so that specifically they can work on those things. And again, this is something that works for me. They say, become a better teacher. I don't know how to do that. But if you say, start giving better feedback, now I know how to do that, right? Or I can learn that. So this is what we're talking about, breaking up small things.
Yeah, and when we say time bound, we want to have that timeline in mind, because children need to know where most of my time is, getting used up. And then we come to the last of it, which is your organization, which where a lot of us as an adults also till date, struggle to manage our workplace, our professional, our household stuff together. And at the same time, we want children to take ownership of their own textbooks, their notebooks, their loose sheets, their assignments, their stationery, everything. So look at these, take a pause and look at these situations. If you have come across any of them, and can you relate to it, and make a mental note of it and keep it. So a lot of as teachers, when we were in school, when we used to do like a locker cleaning, locker checkups, so the minute you open, there will be only crumpled paper that used to fall out of it, or the loose worksheets which the child would have told, ma'am, I lost it, and it would be there. So usually even in their bags. So this is one of the easiest way to start off planning for them, which is like a weekly planner, which has Monday to Saturday days, and you can prioritize, you can customize it for your child. This is also up for download on our website. You can take it, you can customize it for your child. Have, if the child is only going like 4 subjects in a day on your online schooling, you can just take that 4 subjects on the left hand side, and then you can fill up, and at the bottom there is also space where the child can write the goals. If the weekly planner looks very tedious and cumbersome, you can also come up with a to-do list. So your to-do list is any assignment that needs to be submitted, anything, any project, any extra reading that you have to do. Maybe as simple as just reading a book for your own recreation, you want to put up there. You want something, now we cannot put something, I want to go there, I want to have a holiday, I want to do this, something which is very far-fetched, we don't know, we don't have answer to. So something at home, maybe cleaning my room, cleaning my locker, cleaning my working desk, organizing my books, something that you can look forward to. And this is the weekly planner that I'm talking about. You can customize it, you can have, make it more personal for the child, write the name, write the, which week, and see if, right now we have time in hand. That way, if you look at it, it's a blessing in disguise. All these skills we can, if we, start putting it in place for them, it will become a, a practice by the time they start physical school.
And
So
you
if
can
you
link up the goals. If they have certain
yeah.
goals, you can link those goals up here. If you notice that, then they have it in mind, because many times what happens is we have a goal and then we forget about it. It's not like we have the intention to not do it, but we're intentionally not working towards it. So you have that up here, and maybe you can break down and say, by end of the week, I'll go back and take a look and say, did I read that book? I have one, I don't know, a half a book per week. Again, we're going to keep expectations very developmentally appropriate. If it's a child who is not reading, then if they're going to read 10 pages, that is progress. Let's not expect everyone to become perfect. Again, as a parent of a reluctant reader, we've started with not reading at all, though he knew how to read, not reading at all, to now not being able to sleep without reading. So all of these things can happen consistently when we're kind of intentionally working towards it.
So these are some things which we found when we suggested really worked. So we thought we'll share it with you. One is the portable stationery bucket or pouch that I was talking about with the child. So if we are sharing workspaces, easy to carry, move around. Now, if you look at the books, they are color coded. So it's fiction versus non-fiction, sometimes academic versus non-academic. So some visual reminders for the young ones, especially, it works. So anything which has an orange label is my course books, are my academic books, which I need to, take it for my class, or I need to stack it in the right place, versus something which I'm reading for my interest or something that I have. You can also color code subject wise your textbooks and your notebooks, and we have seen it works. So maybe an orange for English, so all your notebooks and the textbook is orange, maybe a little bit on the spine of the book. And if you have, you know, a green for a English, you have all your notebooks and the textbook color coded. So this is a visual reminder straight away which helps the children. And then when we are saying we don't have a designated workspace, fair enough, we have something called a portable basket where you can have your you know, 4 textbooks, more than 4 subjects. I don't know if many schools, most of the schools are doing half a day. So if we can have those textbooks, maybe first half of the day, have a stationery pouch, and you're set. So if you can organize this in the night for the next day, your anyways your organization is better than no organization.
So one of the questions I saw in chat is, how do we start study skills from a very young age, like 6 years old? These are small things we can do to make them, if they can just bring their own books and organize themselves. These are study skills. How do we survey things? Now, again, like we said, study skills is its own setup and we teach it over a long period of time. We have taught it, you know, all the way up. And there are many, many foundational skills we can teach for, say, a 6 to 8 year old. So these are all things that, you know, first being able to keep your books in one place, find them, be able to survey things. So when you're doing, say, restaurants, which restaurant do we want to do? What are the restaurants in this area? Let's understand that building these skills doesn't have to be only through academics. It'll also help academics. But if you're going to make it fun, if you notice some of our visual notes had my travel. And some parents actually got upset with us. They said, you know what, all he did today was talk about superheroes or about game development, because one of our kids had game development as their interest. So we will pick their interest to teach them the skill. Again, what is important there? The content is already there with them. We are not pressuring them 2 times. We are teaching them the skill of how to visual note and how to go and organize themselves. I can do that with content that they're interested in and that they can relate to first. If I talk about to a 6-year-old, I talk about, come on, draw what we, you know, we had a trip, or a typical day at home, or all of your interests, whatever it is the kid is interested in. If you start with that, then you will find that slowly it will transfer to everything. And this concept of academic versus non-academic is also something we really have to break, because we have one brain. There is no math brain, science brain, social science brain. There is one brain. There is one kind of empathy. There is, you know, everything works everywhere. So if I'm able to build it in academics, I should be able to transfer it over to all parts of life, and the same works. So if my child can do a visual note about their interests or come up with a Lego model of something, then I will be able to build it. I will tell them, you know what, you're building skills just like a Lego model, and then tell them which is this part, which is that part, and relate it to them. So you can definitely relate it to little kids and start that early. You want to explain this, Parul, before we show? Parul, you're muted.
Can you now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So we are talking about something very interesting that we felt when we used it with kids, it worked out well. So it's called a loose leaf binder. So we are talking about those regular conventional, those clip binders where you can easily open the clip and insert as much as you want. And when we say loose leaf, we are talking about the rule sheets which are in those plastic envelopes. So the whole idea of not using a notebook is that this binder gives you the flexibility to add on as much as you want subject wise. But a notebook, if you know, you try to do science, math, everything in one notebook, when you really want to refer to it, I don't know how many of us would be, you know, turning the pages and looking for the information that we want. So we suggest if child has a personal binder. So these are the
So if you notice here, what you can do is have plastic protectors. You want to make this for an older kid, you want to have a subject-wise binder, that's an option for the child. Each, you know, you could have your worksheets that your teacher gives you, as well as your visual notes, all related to one chapter in one place, protected, so that all the loose leaf stuff is there. right? Please do not expect your kids to be able to track all their pieces of paper. It's all in one file. It doesn't work. I can't do it. How many of you have gone to training workshops and never touched the binder afterwards because, you know, you didn't think that that was something you would be able to handle? Or it just sits there, and I know it's there, but push comes to shove, I never go back to those notes. I've written it in notes, but I haven't organized it later. But I know I've gone there and that's of use. That's why I went to that workshop, right? So this is something similar. You could have it for older kids, maybe subject wise. For younger kids, you could just have one binder, then, you know, a lot of your stress goes away. Just find the binder. Then they all have all they have to focus is on making sure that the supplies go back into the binder. When we say breaking things, we really mean breaking things simply, and that means your nagging goes down by 40%, right? And that's win-win right there. Cyber security. Now, guys, we are not experts. We are not experts. Please go and definitely do this. Do not take only our word for this. Some suggestions we have are, first, regularly update your software, because obviously now viruses and how things develop is, we're looking at that. Phones and laptops are much slower as well if you don't update your software. So that's something. Please have unique passwords and teach children to have unique passwords, not one password because it's easy to do. That means it gets hacked anywhere, then, you know, pretty much your life is open to hackers. So unique passwords for, say, your school ID and your login, or wherever you log in, even for the fun stuff. Make sure that they're not using, if they're gaming or doing something else, not using the same IDs. There is something called a delegated email account. Gmail only allows a child who is 13 and above to be able to have their own account. So for children below, if you're having email accounts, that's basically the parent creating it. Even for up to, I mean, all the way, and of course, obviously a lot of things now, it's not about controlling our child. Huh? Let's make that sure. We're talking about collaborating. But a child who's 6 and 7 years old doesn't have what it takes to make these decisions. So we teach them and we work with them. If you delegate the account, that means anything that is coming into that account, that a stranger, if they're trying to reach your child, you will also get a copy into your email ID. And that's good to have. And that's a nice balance between controlling and being big brother, because that doesn't work in the long run. We do want children to be independent, even in online usage, right? Lifelong learners is not just for academics, it's for everything else as well. So there is this concept of delegated email accounts. Please take a look. Please make sure that parental controls are on in all of your browsers, in all of your gadgets. There are several ways to do this. And again, I am not an expert. Please also monitor their history sometimes. You know, none of us has what it takes inside to say, if I'm not checked, I will have my integrity all the time. Most of us try, right? But if a child knows that if required, my parents have the access to it, it helps them a little more when that impulsive thought comes. You will still have difficulties. Children will still go to places they're not supposed to. But at least if you monitor, you have a chance to catch it and talk to them about it and come to some kind of a collaborative understanding. None of this we're saying is big brother, lock everything down. Honestly, it doesn't work. You can have apps that are locked after a certain amount of usage if screen time and usage is an issue. Two-factor authentication now is standard. Most people, and I know many people who don't do it even for their email. That means you put in your telephone number as well as your email ID. And if both those factors are not authenticated, kids can't go in and do things and other people can't come and do things. And if they do, you will have some way, it's pinging your phone as well. Please have a pin to phone that children don't know. Most kids, and this is very, very hard. This is super hard, and children very, very young know how to swipe and do this. But if you really want to take a look at screen time, then a lot of the work has to come from us. Biometric locks, if you're going to do that, yeah, that would be one way to make sure that if children, everyone is not so self-driven. There are certain children, and technology is extremely addicting. So if I really want to do that, there will be kids who don't have the, skills in place to control themselves. So these are just looked at as support for that. Please know where your devices are. A huge issue with teenagers is they are on their phones, with their phones in their room and not getting enough sleep. This is a problem. This is a developmental problem. The biggest issue here that I'm going to put out is modeling of responsible screen time ourselves. Children do what we show. They don't do what we say. Telling them, I tell you this, it's good for you, but I'm going to go do something else, does not work. We all try it, right? It hasn't worked. So why don't we try modeling responsible screen time and making sure there are times when you're not doing this? It's got harder now because, and I mean, personally for me, I can work at home and also have a career and manage every other commitment I have because I have access to a phone and a computer and the internet. So I'm not saying that, we have to have shut off times. There is no 9 to 5 job. All that is there. But can we also model and say, all right, there are going to be times when I'm not going to take my phone and we go for a walk and we'll just talk to each other. Right? And none of this again is prescriptive. We don't have all the answers. We also struggle with this on a regular basis. So it's up and down. Collaborative time limits set with older children as they grow older. Talking about hard topics. If someone's going to ask you to send a naked picture, what do you do? If someone's going to get in touch with you, are you going to be on social media? Some of these things get very, very controversial because as parents, we have certain ideas and we have fears, right, for our children's safety. So please talk about the hard topics. When someone's trying to say bad things about your parents and move you away, it could be that they're grooming you. That means then you're not going to come and tell us when we won't be able to help you. So talk about these hard topics, which is very much a part of cybersecurity and screen time. It's not only about the gadget. Some power down time. So when children are working on doing your visual notes or your worksheets, maybe they just don't have any gadgets next to them, power down. This works for me very, very well. Educating children again about the dangers that exist. The one thing that works very well in our house is good old-fashioned board games. We are draconian. As personally, I'm draconian when it comes to this. My children didn't have more than 1 hour per week of screen time. This was in another time when I don't know if that's even possible anymore. But to date, we play this game called Game of Life. And it has lots of things, and it's a phenomenal game in which you can discuss a bunch of things. And that's something we all look forward to when it's time to play as well. And things like learning their music, showing that, you are not, there is a generation gap. I don't think my music will ever be, superseded. I think the Beatles will always be great. I mean, we all have our little things like that, but can we try to learn their music, their games and their lingo and have them teach us? There is also this concept of having to be the friend. It doesn't work. We are the parent. We can be friendly, but there will be times that they will question us and we have to stand strong because end of the day, they're developmentally not there and we are the adult. So this is not a popularity contest. My kids will tell you I'm not at all popular at home. There are also kids at school, but as long as we are honest and fair and kind with it, then this is something that we can think about doing. Again, this is now the bigger picture we'd like to leave you with. That the connect, if you don't have a connect with your kid, they're not going to learn SQ3R and visual notes from you. That's not going to happen. If I as a teacher don't connect to my kid, whether online or offline, then all that I'm putting in is not going to reach them. They might sit there, they may show me compliance, but connect is what it takes for us to move the next step. This is more references because we are not giving gyan here. Yeah. Look up and please read The Growth Mindset. It talks about how we talk to children. We don't tell them you're so smart, you're intelligent, because that actually doesn't work. But we do remark on the effort they put. We say, oh, I see you made that mistake and you fixed it. I see you've added this detail in your book. Because if a child is going to bring that picture to you and you say it's the best picture in the world, believe me, nobody believes that. If that were the case, we'll all be Picassos and Renoirs and out there in some museum, right? But that child's art does have a lot of meaning. And how do we get them to actually engage in it? Please read up The Growth Mindset, that concept. It's powerful. And there is enough out there. You can buy the book if you want to read it, or there's enough resources online as well. Started by someone called Carol Dweck. I'll talk about the collaborate and then Parul will take the remaining two. This partnering and modeling on collaboration. If I'm teaching them to prioritize and I set goals along with them myself, it works. If you're going to get together and learn, like my goal is to learn tennis. I have never played tennis. So if I'm going to do, and my son is phenomenal at that. So I'm actually thinking of asking him or my husband to teach me, to show that it's easier to be in the teacher mode and not in student mode. So we all have to find ways to put ourselves in student mode enough times as well. So please model and partner. Do things along with kids to the level possible. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 5 minutes. It's not only about time, but it's about showing that willingness to work with them. Pardon?
So when we talk about building habits and routines, we mean, so when we said organization at night is helpful, because in morning then nobody is getting rushed. Because a lot of times when we had connect time in schools and children would sit with a long face, we would have, hey, what happened? No, in the morning my mom rushed me and just pulled me out of the bed and I was thrown into the bathroom and I had to take bath and sit in the bus. So if we help children building these routines, these simple organization and prioritizing their tasks will help them. And that should be one commitment that we should give to parents and to children, and children should give it to us. So if we are committed, if we are consistent in our approach, it works. And when we say empathy and respect, so when we say if the child comes to you and you have a say designated, so it's as simple as a night time when you are just hugging the child and having a chat. So no screen, so we actually call it power down time. So no popping up, no WhatsApp, nothing. Have your screen off and have that 20 to 15 to 20 minutes dedicated time, whereas family, maybe a weekend activity that you want to do, but have that empathy. Oh yeah, once when I was also a kid, my mom also used to nag me like this, but we somehow found a way and we have sailed through, and I'm sure you will also sail through. So have show them that empathy and have them that build this skill, which is a very critical life skill, and especially in these times when we want children to be kind more than anything else and empathize with what's happening with other kids and all over the world. So if these general things, if we want to leave you with this, that if you want to read up further and work with the kid, we know it works. So try it consistently and be committed to it. It will work for your kid as well. So any questions, Shweta? We are ready to take.
Sure. I think I'm just checking for.
Yes, Shweta, I've been going through the questions also in the chat. Yeah. Okay. So there were around a couple of questions, and Sangeeta and Parul actually managed to answer most of it as they went through. The first one that came from Rachna Datta was the one about the students' point of view. Have you all looked at it? And Sangeeta did answer that as she went.
If I may add on a little to that.
Yes, please.
We're actually finding both sides of it. There is no one way or the other on this. There are children who tell us, ma'am, we like to work from home. And when we say, don't you miss your friends? They say, no, ma'am, we talk to them anyways. So there's that. Then there are the children who don't like it because they find that a lot of parents are now monitoring a lot more. Because it's, you can hear the teacher. So the parent has got a little more into the issue. So there are children who say, you know what, I want to have my own privacy. I don't want for everything to be open here for all. Teacher sees, parent sees, everything is up there. So we have both sides to it. We are actually finding our children who have different learning needs are doing very well. Right now, suddenly the neurotypical child is struggling a lot more when the neurodiverse child always suffered. Right? Because a lot of the things that are hard for them have been taken away by online learning. So it's hard for us to say there is one student perspective. Just like we all have different perspectives, each child has their own. What we find useful is to find out what our child's perspective is and see how we can work with those things. Do I control COVID? No. Do I control that someone has to have an education in order to do well and have a livelihood? No. But in the meantime, there are many, many things under our control that we can work with.
Okay, so Rachna, I hope that has answered your question. Okay, there was one that was not answered. This is from Sarita Nair, who's a parent to an 11-year-old and also a professional storyteller and facilitator from Mumbai. Okay, so there in Mumbai, they have some of the schools have this pre-recorded sessions by teachers, and there's a timetable to give some sort of framework for children to work around. And it's restricted to around 4 classes per day with the lessons that come in the morning. Now, are there any tips for parents and children who have these kind of learning modules? So daily they're getting around 4 sessions of pre-recorded messages in the morning, and they are expected to work around it at their convenience. Now, how can parents and children work around an organizing or that's the question.
Yeah, I'll take that question. So when we talked about our study skills and visual notes to be more active way of learning, so when the child has pre-recorded, that means anyways we are going into even more passive mode because there is no interaction which is involved. So we would definitely recommend that use of graphic organizers or taking down notes or making summaries out of those pre-recorded sessions will help the child to engage with that text. And secondly, if there is something, if it's a history class or if there is a science, if the teacher provides you link with additional resources or videos, otherwise as parents, if we can provide kids with certain additional resources or specific things that the child can learn or research more on, will help them to stay engaged with the text.
Hmm. Okay.
And again, a lot of what we are saying, we've been doing, these are good things for children to have as skills,
Yeah.
right? And the reason they're universal skills is because they work regardless. And with a pre-recorded session, you can actually stop, pause, and go back.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a benefit that comes from there as well.
However, the bridge or the linking to the engagement needs to be done by the parent in this scenario.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Okay. There's a question from Rishi also that Sangeeta had answered before, but if you need to add on something to it. So how do you build study skills for very young children, that is 6 years, I'm assuming, primary school and above. They're just learning to, deal with the larger school.
So a few book references, like we said, The Growth Mindset as a Concept by Carol Dweck is a good one. Tony Busan has written some phenomenal books on mind mapping for children. There is all kinds of stuff on visual note taking and graphic notes that you can go and read up about. There are even study skills courses that parents can take, right, on Coursera and edX and something like that. And again, the concept is one thing. Learning the concept is one thing. The real crux is in applying it in your setup for your child. That is then hopefully going to show results. The point is not to teach to, right? The point is to learn with. And if we are going to learn with, then we should be able to see results. So if we see results is working, if not, we go back to the drawing board, adapt, and get back again.
Okay. Okay, so that also leads to the question that Rishi again had. So maybe you could put the names of those books and resources in the chat window. She asked for suggestions for additional books or references which can help a parent or teacher to understand how to work on life skills and study skills for the child.
Done.
Okay, so you could put that up. Now, Shilpa asks if we have two kids of different age group with 7 years gap, younger one is left on his own, 14 and 7-year-old children, how to cope up as we are busy in the kitchen or other work at the same time.
This is
So
Parul, because she has a similar problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I have
So-
a similar problem.
Yeah, so I can very well relate to it because I have a 3-year-old and I have a 12-year-old. Now it's very, very difficult to keep a 12-year-old motivated and engaged while at the same time when a 3-year-old is crying for a lot of other needs. So what works for me is having a routine for the younger one as well. So what I do is during that time, I do like weekly themes. So this week I did sea animals. So I already recorded couple of videos and I downloaded few of them which run like a playlist. So they don't stop for 20 minutes. So she enjoys that on the TV. And then after that, there is some activity, Play-Doh, something that is there to keep her occupied. Yes, I cannot be all there all the time because I'm also a working mom. But having a routine for her and having people around who can just supervise works for me. Whereas my 12-year-old knows what to do. She has to log in at 8 o'clock, sit for the class. Her organization is done in the night, so she doesn't have to run for the notebooks. And definitely the planner helps. So when I have that planner every weekend before the Monday starts, so either the Sunday morning or the Sunday evenings is the best time when we sit and prioritize, okay, next week, this is what is coming. Because not only they are having online classes, they are also having tests. They are also having projects. They are also working on different things at school. So everything we put it there so that there is no confusion. And definitely she has been with me for now 3-4 years where we have done study skills. So she's pretty much independent in that skill. So if I don't have a class, I know what I need to do with the text. So she keeps on, using. So all you can do is download few graphic organizers for the older one where she or he is much more independent in the studies, whereas in younger one have a routine. So when see younger ones are at the lost, they don't have anything to do, they don't have any classes now that with the online ban. So have certain routines which helps the child, so the child knows this is the time when I get up, this is what I needs to do. If you have that routine in place, it works.
The other things is give them some responsibilities.
Yeah.
Honestly, the best place to learn I have found is the kitchen. When we work with special kids, we're working with fine motor, gross motor, reading a recipe, sequencing. There is so much that you learn in the kitchen. So you can get your child to sit next to you and pull out the coriander stems for you. Will it be perfectly done? No. But that child is learning while it is. And if I'm going to have a few stems in my food, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, my
That's okay.
3-year-old does the pea. She removes the, does the mutter job so good that we have like 2 kgs every week just for her to keep her engaged.
I was just going to add on, being a homeschooling parent
Yeah,
for the last 10 years, and my children also having a similar age gap.
yeah,
I did the younger one, especially, either I would work out activities which could be clubbed. We've had puppet shows based on the older one's topic, and the younger one singing along, having a rhyme that goes along with the topic. Or as Sangeeta just said, the kitchen. Kitchen is the best place. All my chores, I would get the younger one involved a lot more. The older one was anyway doing it independently. So these are, it's just about stepping back a little and thinking where you can keep them engaged with what you are already doing at home. A 7-year-old is also learning in the process, so you can make the connections with what a 14-year-old is learning. Even if it is a physics, there's always some little bit that can come which a 7-year-old can be interested in. So it's just about you figuring that out as a parent and where you can keep them engaged.
yeah.
Okay, so this is also similar to a question that Ambika had, but both the kids are very similar in age, just 3 years gap, 5 and 2. And the younger one disrupts any teaching time with the elder. And the elder one keeps comparing with the younger and does not want to grow up, she says. I think it's kind of answered, but would Parul or Sangeet want to add on?
I don't want to grow up either.
Yeah, nobody wants to grow up either. We all want to be in
And
that safe
it's fun
space.
to not be an adult. Let them please not grow
Yeah,
up. Let them do what it is. 5 and 3, I mean, seriously, that you're even managing and all in one piece is good enough. And they're learning. They don't need for us to provide only educational opportunities. They're learning anyways. Help them, bring you, set the table for you, bring stuff from here and there. I mean, that itself is your gross motor right there. So please, I mean, take it easy. If you have a 5 and 3-year-old, have fun. This goes away. I have 2 teenagers at home. One is going to be 16 next year and the other is going to go to college. I wish I could go back to your time. So enjoy it, please.
Sandhya, I'm very tempted to take this question by Anusha, that how do we take time to teach these skills to our children when they have 6 subjects to learn and the children are only age 10 and 8. So our take on this would be, we have worked with so many kids, and trust me, all the kids have to go through the same drill because the education system doesn't change. Now, what we want parents to understand is what the skills we are talking about is not something that we want them to learn as a subject in itself and say, okay, you are learning 6, here is one more, so it makes it total in 7. So we want parents to know that these are the tools, like for example, now everybody is been talking about finding solutions of screen time. If you say, hey, if you do it on TV, it's not going to be harmful for your eyes. If you do it this way, so we want them to know that these are the skills which we don't want them to learn in isolation. Once you learn these skills, you practice, you involve them in your day-to-day functioning. If you are doing notes, if you are writing notes, can you break that paragraph into 5 bullets? If you are doing a flow chart, or if you are in history, instead of like 1 or 2 pages of text, can I do a timeline and just remember it like that, will help the child to learn more effectively and efficiently. And over the years we have seen, if you consistently use it, you become independent learners anyway. So we just want people to know that it's not something which we prescribe as an isolated activity or an add-on subject. So it's something we want children to use it in their day-to-day learning process.
When we do it, when we do our workshops, we do it over a weekend. Children go back, practice, and come back, and we help them do it. So it takes about an hour every other weekend, maybe every weekend, for 3 or 4 weekends, and then you're done. And actually, what that helps is those burdened with notes and notes goes down. So this 1 hour or 4 hours in total that you put actually saves you more than that even in 1 week.
So I was just about to ask you, since Teachers Collective does this, I'm sure many parents have this question running in their head. The reason being, you have given the tools here. However, I'm not sure, or many parents wouldn't be sure that they are equipped to make the right choices for their children, or to help them figure out which one is required, to be the facilitator there, to even help them pick on the skills. So how do you usually work in your individual sessions as a workshop? How does that, how do you all work? There would be groups of children. Would you be helping them individually as well?
So we work in small groups, and we highly encourage parents to attend. So that means then, see, what happens is we teach visual notes, and then a parent says, what is this doodling? What is this drawing? Go and do real work. So we want the parent also to be involved. When we work in schools, we work with the teachers, the parents, and the children. And we do the teachers and parents first before we go to children, because it's hard enough bringing them on board, and we don't want to then, want them to be discouraged. So when we do small groups. We don't go, face to face, we don't go more than 20 to 25 children. Online, it's even smaller. We're looking at between 10 and 12 children. Send us your kids. If you can't do it, we'll do it for you. Please join us. We want you to hold it. And then again, we are there. So come back and talk to us. But the teaching itself is not a problem. If you don't come to us, I'm sure, again, I am very proud of our design. I know that the way we do it works. I know that we are really good at what we do when it comes to these things. So that professional pride I have. So you want to bring me your kid, I'll do that, great. But if you don't want to, I'm sure there are other people. And just like we learn, you could also learn. It'll just take a longer learning curve. That's about it.
Right, and you're also helping or hand-holding the parent through this journey to make
always,
them
always. See, it
than
doesn't work otherwise. I teach and I leave, right? And children can come to me, but the parent is the one who's there. So even when we work with children with different learning needs, we have to make sure the parent is emotionally, physically, socially, in all ways there. And we always hold the parent. It just doesn't work otherwise.
Okay.
And by the way, we have on our blog as well as on Facebook, we put a form. So if anyone wants to register and they're interested, then that's where they can tell us who they are and we can get back to them.
Okay, you could also share it with us and we will be with the group. All right. Girish Krishnamurthy has a couple of questions, more technology inclined. Children take to video games very easily. Why? It seems like a very immersive and rewarding experience for them. Can teaching pedagogy not be aligned similarly? That's one question. He also has another one.
Yes.
Can I add that on? I think that would go together. Can there be technology tools which can be incorporated into teaching effectively? Why be averse to technology per se? I mean, I think
let me start from the bottom. First of all, it's not a binary world, technology versus no technology. Two, we are working with a generation that is much more tech savvy than we are. So not having technology is not an option. And I'll tell you why I'm so excited with this. When I did the autism diploma, my dissertation was on how do you get children to be grade 1 ready using apps. So technology can absolutely be a phenomenal tool to learn. You can learn online, you can learn through technology. For us, what is the final crux is, can the child transfer it into their everyday learning? If I'm talking about estimation, I can do it through baking in the house, and I can do it through a baking app in the house. At the end of it, when that estimation has to translate into something like math, or how far is that, or what effort I have to put, if that's going to be able to translate into it, that is where I see proven learning. So for that, absolutely, we should not ever be averse to technology. Technology is intrinsically motivating for kids. but it cannot be the only way. We have to have some kind of a blended model. And even if school is going to become online, or not online again and face to face, we have to have some kind of a blended model. We work with kids, a child with a learning difficulty and an attitudinal problem who we did not know at all online, and we were able to turn them around in 2 classes, right? Which is when I say my professional pride, I can do that. But, and if I had the face-to-face time, it will probably take me the same time. So this is not a one versus the other ever. We don't have that luxury. It's got to be everything that works and not be purists, not throw out, everything else for tech, or not throw out tech for everything else. It's got to be some kind of a combination.
Shweta had said this earlier, my co-admin Shweta, that her daughter learns a lot in the kitchen and she has learning difficulties. So there's a lot of learning that can happen around you. Anusha's, one of her questions was answered by Parul, that was taken earlier. She also has another question. Her younger child has a difficulty in written expression in any language. Orally, he's very clear, but spellings and handwriting are a mess. How can I help him, is her question.
Parul, you want to go?
So usually we recommend that when the child is as young as 6, we don't want to pressurize child in forcing or nagging the child to write, because sometimes it could be a developmental delay also. So what we would recommend is that start off with sight words, basic sight words, repetitive vocabulary that you keep flashing. So either you can have word cards, or you can have theme-based cards, or whatever the child is learning at school. If you can have 10 or 15 words for a week, and then you have cards. There is also this generator which is there on the Google, so you can have these words generated on a template and keep practicing these words. So basically we are not only creating a visual memory, and help the child write these words to create the muscle memory. So we don't want at this point of the time child to be frustrated and give up on writing and develop aversion to learning at all. So having these storybooks which have repetitive sight words as vocabulary words, and having the vocabulary words as flashcards, will help the child in registering these words.
You could use also visual notes, right? Instead of writing, if they draw. Remember,
Yeah.
writing is not just the handwriting bit. We could also, developmentally, it's okay for a child. Now, you said younger child, but you've not said the age. So developmentally, up to a certain
The child
point,
is 6 years
Mentioned
old.
age earlier.
6
I
or
think 8-year-old.
at which point spelling mistakes are par for the course.
Yeah, they are called invented spellings. So
The
that is
invented
accounted for.
spelling. And that's normal. That's perfectly normal, right? So don't worry about it. If handwriting is an issue, then again, the kitchen. Get them to do ATA, get them to do things that develop, because anything that's going to help these fingers work together is what will help you with handwriting. And that doesn't have to be, if a child is saying don't write, by making them write more pages, we are not going to do anything. All we are going to do is make that child even more averse to writing. But we can break it down. We can ask them to write bullet points. We can ask them to draw their stuff, and we can help strengthen whatever it is that they're finding difficult.
And one thing also which worked has is the grippers. So if it's just the formation and it's the effort that goes into the writing, if you can provide them with pencil grippers so that they have better grasp or better grip at the writing equipment, it helps children to basically you ease off the pressure on writing.
There's a bunch of grips in a plastic cover there. I'll try and see if I can find you my grips to show it to you.
Oh, okay. So this is also another thing I would get my son to make my shopping lists for me, write it down for me. I would just tell him if there were spellings, I would spell it out. So it was a little bit of writing practice without having to sit at a place and make it like a chore that he had to do. He's not one of, writing is not one of his favorite tasks still at 13. But this is something that I get him to do often. Okay, so I needed to ask you, can you tell us more about how you work with the schools?
1 second, the grip point that Parul mentioned, these are some of the grips that we actually use.
It's easily available.
Yeah, some are easily available, some are not. Sometimes, I mean, nowadays more and more things are easily available. So this is a grip. We have all kinds of grips. This is a simple grip that you will find. All it does is just makes your pencil thicker, right? You could try triangular pencils that don't have paint on them, that are a little thick, that will help children work. This is one, the triangular one, this is something children love.
Yeah.
So you put this on top of your pencil, and see, if it's triangular, there are 3 fingers. There is no doubt on which finger goes where. 1 finger per surface and you're done. So it takes the thinking out of it for all of this. Simple things to do, actually. And by the way, those shopping lists that you make, please save them, because unfortunately children learn spelling after some time, and then it's not so cute after that. So please save them and hold on to them.
Okay, so back to the question on how do you work with schools generally?
So we've been working with schools in and out, Sandhya. So we work on 2 models. One is we work with teachers and over 2 days, and we teach them, we work with skills, some practices that they have already been doing at school, and just do a little bit of enhancement and maybe add on and make them aware of these things. The other model is where we work with children. So we've been working with a couple of schools where we work from as young as grade 5 to grade 10. And we've been working on study skills, visual notes, how to make notes, how to take notes, and a lot of your time management and organization skills. So these are the 2 models that we've been working with.
So for study skills, those are our programs. We also do debating. We're doing one now. We have, we're doing helping people set up special ed rooms. So I think basically we work with the system, in it as well as out of it. Our focus is always on the kid. So whatever it takes, we're also not purists about it. Whatever it takes for that child to get them there, we scaffold and get them there.
Anusha says she is quite relieved, and she was very anxious earlier. Thank you. Girish Krishnamurthy also has another question. I'm not sure if today's teaching methods reward children for their learning. IT is quite one way, and it then gets to be a task the child is doing, that is to learn. What are the best ways to reward which teachers can adopt, and also parents? Okay, rewarding.
Okay, so I hate to break it to you, but at no point was learning ever rewarded. I hate to break it. You see, there are certain things we've taken an imperfect system and now suddenly we want ideal, it doesn't work. Think about as a parent what I was told. If you're going to get marks, you're going to get good education, you're going to get admission, you're going to do well. So learning in terms of how I actually learned, I am only doing it now. Reward, I don't know that rewarding is the right concept for me. The question is, how do I motivate and interest them and make them passionate about their own learning? Right? Rewarding, I mean, you give me what? A carrot? If I'm going to lose weight, I will get a carrot. I'm sorry, it's not. What will I do? You will give me more food, right? A lot of times the rewards we give are also not appropriate. So this concept of rewarding for something. Now, why am I rewarding a child for doing well for themselves? Should I be punishing them for not doing what they're not supposed to do and rewarding them for doing what is good for them? The concept is to motivate and get them further. And in that, it is, if it's going to be a task, I don't look at it as a task. And I'll tell you my personal example. I was not a very, accounting came to me as a mandate by my parents because they thought as a girl, you will do well if you have to work, you can support yourself. But until I became a teacher as 40, I would be very easy. I mean, I would turn off my computer, accounting books put me to sleep. The only reason I didn't get fired was because I was too stubborn. And I ended up getting some skills and I was actually decent at what I did. But now as a teacher, because I enjoy what I do, I have to physically shut myself off. I'm constantly looking for things. Now, there is no way you can reward me. What we want is for people to find their interests and be able to then take themselves further. Those interests may sometimes be subjects, they may not be subjects. Many times they are not, right? But now there are many more avenues. So it's up to us as parents. Let's not expect teaching methods to do what they never were doing. Our school systems don't do this and they never did.
Yeah, this is Girish here. Can I just clarify my question a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, so I didn't mean reward in a physical sense like a carrot or a cake or a chocolate. And that's not the reward I meant. What I meant was that when let's say I am a student and I am learning something, then I need to realize that whatever I learned is now going to be extremely useful to me in whatever an objective is. That feedback mechanism, that okay, what you learned today is going to help you in this and this, that I don't see happening much, and that is what I meant by the reward.
So my approach has been, again, I'm no expert and I can tell you what I did. My approach has been to provide opportunity. My telling someone this is for your good, it did not work for me, it doesn't work, whoever does it. But suppose I were to provide an opportunity for that child to go and take it up further. I'll give you an example. My son wants to play cricket for India. I can provide them the opportunity of giving him one-on-ones to build that up. Then it is intensely rewarding for him because it's in something he likes to do. Now the cricket coach says it's not only enough to do sports, please also study. So he studies for that and gets it through. We will all have certain things that we don't enjoy doing that we have to do. And then there'll be other things that we will gravitate towards. The question is, how do we make sure children are doing the bare minimum in what is required and refine themselves and get further in what they don't, what they want to take up. So my thing has been to provide the opportunity. Instead of saying, if you don't do this, you won't be able to do, can you get them to actually go and teach with someone or teach someone, right? Ask them to teach the concept. Then they see how rewarding it is to learn themselves. So opportunity and avenues are the one things I think I would suggest.
So Sangeeta, I agree. I mean, maybe my questions are not exactly what you might have expected, and there's no easy answer. But for example, I don't want to drag this too long, but if there is a math problem which I am teaching, and I can easily maybe explain to my child after teaching the math topic that, okay, this is where you can utilize it. But for example, when I'm teaching him or when I'm monitoring how he learns history, I mean, what Akbar did 2000 years ago or whatever, it is of no consequence. And I personally find history very boring, right? Now, that's what I meant, that, is there a way to kind of balance this learning versus utilization for a child, rather than just saying, no, you need to learn about this irrespective of what it means?
Okay, Parul wants to take it, and I want to take it.
I want to take it, and thank you so much, Mr. Girish, for bringing this up, because I, as a child, hated math. I always used to tell Sangeeta, I'm not a math person. Math is not my cup of tea, and I think it translated and it had a ripple effect on my child. So my child also started saying, Mom, I'm not good at math. I'm not a math person. So is there a way I can drop out math? But I'm very good at other subjects. So Sangeeta keep telling me, you should not be saying that you are not a math person. There is not something I'm good at, not good at. I was a person, not a person. So sometimes our own personal choices, personal interests and biases are the hindrance. So if we don't put them in these slabs and say whether I'm this person, not this person, it helps. So if you bring in that change and say, I know history is boring, but can we make interesting? Can we look at videos? Can we look at documentaries that are available and have some conversations around that subject, which you can bring in some comfort, helps.
So on the history topic, I completely disagree that it is not related to what we do today. Yeah. So when we pulled our son out to homeschool around the time Akbar was being taught in CBSE. So we had a debate on which is better, Akbar or Aurangzeb. Now Akbar is the golden boy and Aurangzeb is one everyone loves to hate. But when we actually went into it in detail, we found that it is harder. So we brought it up as a company. Is it easier for us to go and manage a growing company or to manage a company which is on its decline, that previous CEOs have gone and messed up, right? And now I'm going to have to hold that company and manage outward threats. When the Mughal Empire was on the decline is when Aurangzeb came. So we did debates. We related it to the everyday. We do so debating is something we teach as well. And these are concepts that come up every time, right? And the issue is not, is it Aurangzeb and did he build a road? Right? I will give you standard answers. Everyone would have built some kind of a road. They would have done some wells. They would have done some, built some restrooms and rest houses. Go write that. But the concept is not that. We take it deeper, and then that's up to us to figure out and relate to their everyday. I find that everything in history is absolutely relatable to today. some of which we repeat the mistakes, others we've learned better, and we can do a compare and contrast. And again, this is a much bigger discussion outside of this thing. So maybe we'll go to
Yes.
other questions. If you
I
want.
agree 100%, but I like that line of thought which you just mentioned about debating and these kind of skills. It's another skill which we are talking about. And in today's teaching pedagogy, we don't see that much happening in the day-to-day, even in online learning. It is all mostly one way, and it's not so much the other way. So maybe that is the point I was trying to make. We need to make it more interactive with debates and discussions, not necessarily a debate, but a discussion relationship to what might be happening today instead of something else. This is the techniques I was talking about. Thank you.
Make it personal,
May
right?
I just add something, Sangeeta?
Yeah.
Yeah, so our perception mostly, even when the children are younger, we are working towards the goal of the exam. Our goal is not to make learning interesting or make the topic or concept interesting for the child. The exam skills are a totally different thing. If you make learning interesting, so it also depends on the board that your child is in. So for an IB board or for an IGCSE, it is more application based. History itself is interesting because the child is given to analyze the situation and understand, as Sangeeta said. While in a CBSE, the exam focuses on the information that needs to be given. However, having said that, exam skills are very different. You can learn it in an interesting manner and then work on exam skills on how to put the content that you have learned for the sake of an exam.
Yes,
First,
I agree.
focus on the learning.
Yeah, Sandhya, that's an excellent point. I mean, anyway, like somebody mentioned, it's a much bigger topic, and maybe you folks can have that discussion for all of us parents, and maybe bring in some teachers also at that point. It would be very helpful.
Malya Aditi, last December, we went and presented there as well. How do we do study skills for the teaching of the humanities? They actually had a 2-week conference on this. I mean, 2-day conference on this. And they had different streams on how to approach it. So maybe I don't know if they have their sessions online, but there is some concept of what topics could be from their website as well.
Right. Thank you very much, all of you. It was a great session.
Okay.
Thank you, Manu.
Okay, Sandhya, Shweta, we are almost at 1 o'clock. I don't know how many of you realize that we've been. It's a good. Yeah, it's been a very interesting session and very, very participative also. The very fact that we have quite a lot of them staying back till now shows that. So, on behalf of Bengaluru Schools Education Initiatives, thank you everyone for joining in. We have recorded this session and this will be uploaded on YouTube and it will be shared on the groups that we have. We are facing some technical issue on the Zoom direct link. And I was checking with others also. Most of us are facing this issue on, it's not going on live on Zoom because of some technical issues at their end. So apologies on that. So thank you so much, Sangeeta and Parul, Teachers Collective team, for being part of initiative of BSEI. We look forward to much more such collaborations going forth. We are open to more discussions. We want to have collectively doing things that can better education and schooling in Bangalore. That's the objective that we've been running for. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for spending a good 2 hours on a Sunday. So you had a choice of either sleeping over or attending the session. You chose to attend the session. So that shows that you're all working together onto one goal. So thank you so much, and we will see you on the next event. Thanks all.
Thanks BSEI. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Parul and Sangeeta, and the rest of you also who were here participating in this webinar.
Thank you so much.
So I'll be logging out. Thank you.
Thank you.